Hey guys, welcome to another video. So today I want to look at 2d6 Dungeon and in particular Inventive Usage. I've had a few questions over the last few months and people are interested in its application, its flexibility and some examples. So that's what we're going to be looking at in today's video. You can find the rules for Inventive Usage on page 19 of the 2d6 Dungeon core rules book. It reads as follows. While you explore the dungeon, you will read the text that describes rooms and encounters. At times, this will include objects or features which theoretically can be interacted with. For example, a plate on a table or a fireplace. Even though the text does not prompt interaction, you can act if you wish. This is called Inventive Usage and is an imaginative form of roleplay that allows you freedom to improvise. However, there are some guidelines that should be followed as outlined below. So in that first paragraph you can hear that you need to pay close attention to the objects and items in the text that describes the room. So what is this guideline that we need to follow when it comes to inventive usage? Well, having the idea in the first place is the initial step. But this should also be tempered by common sense. For example, you find a pillow and you decide through inventive usage that you want to strip the material to serve as a bandage. This is fine, but it will not give you an unlimited supply, nor will it even make 10. In reality, it could probably make you 2 bandages, especially when you've ripped it apart in a haphazard manner. Another example I like to use is the presence of a table. So if you're in one room and then you go to the next room, the adjacent room, and there's a high object, you could, if you wished, you could drag the table from the previous room into this new space, the new room where the high object is, climb on it and reach that object. Nowhere in the text has it described that you could do this. You just have to make that kind of leap of faith, that conclusion, and come up with the idea yourself. It's the interaction between objects in the space, how you then affect those objects. Staying with the high object, a shelf where there's something you can't reach. If you had a hook and some rope, you could combine the two, throw it up, and then climb up and grab that object. We'll look at some more examples in a minute, but I wanted to add here that inventive usage really is about flexibility. It's giving the player license to be creative with what they find in the dungeon. These are the types of questions that you would pose to a dungeon master or a games master. And you would ask them whether it's possible. You have to make that decision based upon that common sense element. That's the important thing. Imagine yourself there in that dungeon. Could you use those items to do the required quest or action? There's a balancing act. As you become more powerful and you increase your levels, potentially you may be able to do more difficult things. And in fact, in 2d6 Legendary Dungeon, which recently funded on Kickstarter, your legendary character has even more license to do more incredible things, legendary things. So in the beginning, when you're level 1, you may struggle to do some tasks, but as you become more powerful, the power, if you like, of the inventive usage increases and you're able to do more superhuman things. But of course, that comes from your own mind. And if you can delve deep and find those options, then you can make it more exciting and expand out the narrative. This is important. Inventive usage feeds the narrative. Allow it to be fun and creative. It's also worth adding here that you don't have to make a roll. If you've got the ingredients, you've applied the common sense, it seems feasible, you are a capable adventurer and you can do this task. So don't have to roll, it just happens. You've got the right ingredients together and have been, therefore, rewarded for it. On the 2d6 Dungeon Facebook group, there have been some great questions about inventive usage. what I thought I'd do is read some of those out, because they're really good examples of people using inventive usage, but also asking how far they can push it. So let's have a look at those examples. Matthew says in his comment, "We all know inventive usage. I can take raw meat off a human or whatever. Could I then use that meat to distract a dog in combat?" Does inventive usage, in a sense, expand into affecting a combat situation? He gives an example. "I recently battled a guard and his dog in level 1. Could the meat be thrown for the dog to chase and eat whilst I fight the guard? Obviously, it might only last a turn or two." This is a really good question. In the first instance, if you took the meat off a human, you would become blooded. So that's the first thing to note with this comment. Could you use the meat to distract a dog in combat? I don't see why not. I think there's less chance of it happening because the owner, the guard, would be encouraging the dog to attack you. So I would probably say this is pushing the boundaries of inventive usage. But I like it. I like the narrative, the creativity of this question. So go for it, is what I say. Of course, if you're in a situation where you're constantly doing this, you will be blooded a lot and there will be a price to pay. And the chances are you're not necessarily going to meet many dogs with guards as you move through the levels. So this would probably be something you do as a one-off. But I really like this concept and the idea. JL asks a question which I probably get the most. It's the most common question when it comes to inventive usage. Can inventive usage be used to bash the locks on chests, make precision checks, carefully hit the lock and not the chest on risk of breaking contents, and rolling for noise? Well, again, it's one of those, you're pushing the boundaries. You're going to encounter quite a few chests, and if you've got a rock and you can bash the lock open, it kind of defeats the purpose of the lock pick. This is one of those situations where it has to be fairly unique, I feel, if you're to go ahead with it. I am inclined to say no. For a start, the dungeon doesn't really have sizable rocks. The human ancestry dungeon, it's not like a rough, raw place, so you're not likely going to find huge rocks to be able to do this. And if you do, there's a good chance you may well hurt yourself in the process. So if you were to do it, I would be more inclined, rather than make a precision check, it would be more a question of opting to take some damage if you did. So I'd swerve towards the no on this because of the mechanism of lockpicking and the importance of those items. And there's also this element of going back for a chest, tracking back through rooms. That is then diminished if you then crack the lock with a rock. So I unfortunately would say no on this one. Angelica, a while back, asked, is the inventive usage really a case of choose what you want to do, which is not written in the rules, or ? This is something that I think people are unsure about. It really isn't about making up new rules. It's about using what's there. It isn't really designed to replace things that aren't yet there either, because the actual rule matrix, if you like, is pretty comprehensive. View inventive usage as adding something, taking some ingredients and just making sense of it, but they have to be there. It's rare that you actually imagine that an item's there. There are some exceptions. So, for example, if you find a kitchen and it doesn't list pots, but you've got an idea for a pot, I would say go for it. As long as it's not anything of value that you can then take and sell, and you're coming up with a whole bunch of random stuff that hasn't been listed or written about. Emiliano, in one of his comments, asks, what are curtains for? Inventive usage only? ? Well, Curtains are for covering walls or spaces or doorways, yes. And they are one of the exits, so they are an integral part of the game. If you do find a curtain, though, it's creating an atmosphere in a space. A particular type of space has curtains. Whenever I place objects or items in a location, then it's meant to give a flavour and atmosphere. But yes, they can be used for inventive usage. So you could rip some curtains up and make a bandage. You could apply it as a blind if you need to, given a certain situation. You could tie them together to create a rope. Of course, if you take curtains down, they become a heavy item if you carry them around. So you have to write that in your heavy item slot, and you can only carry so many heavy items. In another comment, Angelica has a couple of really good questions. So the first is, can I take bones of a long dead prisoner for an offering to a god? Yes, you can. The second question is, can I hack a chair with my axe for wood, make a noise check, and throw the wood into a burner to get ash? Am I on the right way regarding inventive usage? Yes, you are. That is a really good example of how you might get some objects for offerings to the gods. That was another part of having inventive usage. It allowed people to get items so they could make offerings to gods, given the right room and shrine. Alessandro leaves a comment about inventive usage. This is in respect with 2D6 Realm, which is the overland expansion for 2D6 Dungeon. And he says, now whatever ends up in my backpack, I immediately think of how to use it, perhaps in combination with something else, or to decorate the garden at home. And this is great fun for me. That's using inventive usage in a slightly different way, in a way that doesn't actually affect the outcome of any tasks or missions in game. Instead, what Alessandro's doing there is creating narrative, adding something visual, changing his garden or the way that he looks, and in that way sort of fleshing out the enjoyment of the game. And suddenly you can use items found maybe to embellish these aspects, and that can also be another fun way of using inventive usage in 2D6 Dungeon. In one of his comments, Noah points out a really interesting thing about inventive usage. You can use it to fix things. So here is his example. The thrill on my son's face when, in the last room of the dungeon, he found a piece of broken armour and actually had the stuff to repair it. Leather, found wrapped around some cheese, and a needle and thread from a dark cleric's pouch. That is a really, really intuitive thing. It just shows that if you collect items, they can have a function. And if you're repairing stuff, and it's not just armor you can repair, there are other things in game as well, like pouches, for example, then you can implement that rule and use creative inventive usage in such a manner. Another really straightforward question from Brian was, I found a wooden shield missing its leather strap fasteners. I also found a golden buckle. Would that potentially work to fix it? Or am I thinking way too general and need to look for something more specific? That sounds like a great solution to that situation, and I can imagine that golden buckle on that shield, and it would give it a real character. So yeah, go for it. So don't forget that part of inventive usage is the management of containers. So you may well use a potion, or you will use a potion, you will drink it, and you can keep that potion bottle. You could then use it later to make another potion. But if you've got a potion bomb, when you throw that, you break the glass. You cannot recover potion bottles from potion bombs. With pouches, if you use something in a pouch, you can still keep that empty pouch and use it later for storing things. So think about the items that you're left over with through those actions. There are some good examples of inventive usage. I think, on reflection, you need to consider an appropriate consequence if you do something that pushes the boundaries. If it makes a noise, you may need to roll to see if a patrol comes. If you're doing something dangerous, you may take some damage. Just apply that common sense to the situation, and then hopefully you will be rewarded. So let me pass this over to you guys. If you've got any really good examples of inventive usage, add them in the comments section down below. It'd be really fascinating to read. It'd probably be really helpful for people also. And you know, it's just really nice to be able to share a little bit of creativity or genius in that moment that helps you through a situation. So guys, I hope you found this all interesting. If you did, click the thumbs up, and if you're not subbed already, it'd be awesome if you could. If you've got any questions, also add them in the comments section down below. And I will catch up with you very soon.